In 2015, Myron Sukumaran and Andrew Chan were executed by an Indonesian firing squad for their part in the Bali 9 heroin smuggling operation. Guilty depicts the final 72 hours of Myron Sukumaran's life as he was transferred from Bali's Kerabokan prison. The film will screen in cinemas across the nation next week on the 16th World Day Against the Death Penalty. Pastor Christy Buckingham was Myron Sukumaran's spiritual advisor at his execution, and she is in the studio with me. Welcome.
Thanks, Patricia.
Myron's execution garnered international criticism, but there were some people who felt this was a message that needed to be sent. Do you think his death has changed how some view capital punishment?
Well, I can only speak for the people that I have come in contact with, and that is the fact that people realise now that it is not a deterrent. They watched the events unfold after that, and certainly Indonesia still has a drug problem. And I think recognising the issues that these men went in, yes, they had done the wrong thing, but they turned their lives completely around, and the power of rehabilitation. And do we have the right to kill somebody? And should we kill somebody if they actually are going to end up helping others that in a way that we could never do?
That was obviously a very emotional moment here in Australia, particularly because, of course, these two were Australians. You were, as I said in the introduction, really closely involved as Myron's spiritual advisor. What kind of impact has it had on you on a personal level?
Well, the way I deal with it on a personal level is really by making sure that I make his last wishes come true, and that is in terms of speaking out against the death penalty in any opportunity I have. So whether it's a one-on-one conversation or an opportunity like this, because if I thought too much about the pain and the waste, I don't think I would do very much good to their legacy. They were courageous, they were incredible young men, and so therefore, I want to do what I can to see this horrendous thing stop, and hopefully in my lifetime.
Have you been a spiritual advisor to others who are on death row, who are waiting for their execution?
Yeah, I'm currently a spiritual director for 2 people on death row, and whether they will have their penalties inflicted or not, we don't know. We hope that they won't, but there is obviously that constant issue of having to have that at the back of your mind.
Who are these 2 people? Where are they?
2 British citizens. Yeah. One is in Kerabokan, Lindsay Standiford from the UK, and another one is in Terangan in Jakarta.
And of course, when you are a spiritual advisor, as you are during this period, part of it is not only providing the support, but it's campaigning throughout this period to stop this outcome. That must be incredibly difficult work when it's a very direct outcome that you're talking about. These are real people's lives. This isn't just a sort of debate, a sort of high school debate. I remember in year 11 we would have debates like this. This is about real people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a challenge because often when you go in, say, for example, to do an interview and you talk about this and you talk about how ludicrous it is, if you want, I remember Jokowi saying we have to send this message loud and clear as our war against drugs in Indonesia. And I'm thinking, well, you've just killed 2 of your best weapons. So often when you talk to people and you go through the sensible argument against the death penalty, by the end of it, they have changed their approach. But it is literally talking to people one person at a time.
Do you feel like the mood is changing around the death penalty? Of course, I kind of ask a very big question, but it depends place by place. Let's start with Indonesia, where, of course, this is a huge issue. Has there been a shift?
Certainly. I was in a cafe only recently and an Indonesian came up to me and he'd seen, I was doing a thing on the book, The Pastor and the Painter, and he'd seen this and he came up to me straight away and said, I apologise for what Indonesia did. So it depends a lot on the age group, certainly young adults, are seeing the lack of sense in it. And then further, at home here, I mean, we have had an incredible push from our government. They have written an all-of-government strategy against the death penalty, which is a wonderful paper posted on the DFAT website. And they put that out on the 15th of June, just ahead of the screening in Parliament of Guilty, which we did on the 18th of June. And again, even to have a screening of a movie like that in Parliament shows that people were pulled into this argument, pulled into this debate. And if you remember back to the time, there was a moment where we had several of the ex-Prime Ministers of Australia all write a letter to Jacobi. We also had Parliament stop in that moment where Tanya Plibersek and Julie Bishop had a whole conversation around the issue. So it certainly brought the issue and the issue of second chances and the issue of rehabilitation, the justice or lack thereof, and how do we deal with it, and how do Australians see it when it's not right here on our shores right now, but it does affect our people. We have 8 neighbouring countries that still inflict the death penalty. And whilst Australia is totally anti the death penalty, we also are totally anti-drugs. So we're in this position where we need to work in both arenas.
So when you're campaigning on something like this, how important is a film like Guilty, for instance, in that process?
Well, the film Guilty, I think, is a very balanced and respectful film. It's respectful to Indonesia, and it certainly shows the rehabilitation of the boys, and it shows the total, the fact that the death penalty is a penalty on the entire family. There is nowhere for Raji Sukumaran or Helen Chan to go and visit their sons now. It is final and it is irreversible. And so people who came out of the film, even in Canberra and anywhere else that it has been shown, have seriously said, this has made a big difference to me. I was speaking to someone yesterday at the gym who said they had done an act of mercy for someone else simply because they normally wouldn't have done it, but they thought if they don't give somebody a second chance, who else will? And they'd seen what we had done, and so they wanted to do the same sort of thing. It opens people's mind, I think, to the fact that this could be your son, this could be your brother, this could be your nephew,
And of course, that's what the Myuran Sukumaran's story really has resonated across, particularly this country. You talked about these 2 people that you're currently the spiritual advisor for. Is making those stories international news, national news, part of that campaign for you? I mean,
well, I think the reality is that up until 6 months before the boys were executed, they were killed. It was very much a case of continuing constantly to try and apply every legal avenue for the boys. And even though those were exhausted, there were still areas that the lawyers who were just continuing on to fight and fight and fight. But there does come a time where people have to know that this is happening. And certainly the media around the boys has made the whole conversation. I mean, before people weren't talking about the death penalty because we haven't had it here for over 50 years in Australia. So it certainly has brought it into, front and foremost conversation. And certainly I know that a lot of people are talking about it both in schools now as a preventative. So that has to be a good thing.
Are you still in contact with Myuran's family?
Yes, I am, which is, that was one of Mayu's last wishes. And I said to him, this might be a hard thing to do because, your mum, when she sees me, I'll be the last person that saw you alive. And that might be difficult for her. And he said, my mum's a strong woman. She'll be fine. And she's been amazing. She has been so staunch she's actually in the movie herself, representing herself. And in fact, it was her courage. She said to me, when they asked me to represent myself in the movie, I said, you've got to be joking. I'm a pastor, And
were you reluctant?
Oh, I just no point, just straight away. I said no. And then they said, well, what would you say if we told you that Raji was going to be representing herself? And then I said, well, I'll speak to the family and see how they feel. And they said, we really want you to represent yourself because we want it to be as like what happened on the night as possible so that people don't put their own interpretation on it.
Well, did you find it re-traumatising?
Oh, it was awful. It was awful. And the actor was so like Mayu. When I saw him, I just wanted to touch him. I just wanted to, just for one moment, they had painted on his tattoos and it felt like Mayu. And he was just such a nice guy. The actor was such a nice guy. And it was just difficult. Although the advantage was that you've got cameramen and it's not like a real scenario.
Does that play on your mind, those last moments?
They do play on my mind. And leading up to the 10th of October, which is the World Day for the Abolition of the Death Penalty, when we're showing the movie around Australia, I see different adverts for it. I hear different things, and it just brings it all back, like as if it's today, as if it's yesterday.
So, as you've mentioned, October 10th does mark the 16th World Day Against the Death Penalty. How do you measure success in a campaign like this?
Well, I think first of all, to see the active participation of the whole of government in relation to the strategy against the death penalty, to see also that between Japan, India, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, China, Malaysia and Singapore, we have over 3 million people travel there every year from Australia, which is, just short of 10% of our population. And to see that people are actually now looking at this in a different way, considering, these nations, is there a death penalty there? Do we want to support these nations? And also, out of the 23 nations that executed last year, since 2015, the numbers are almost half. So whilst any execution is, to me, it's a vengeance killing, is not right. Still seeing it moving forward on both political and social agendas is important to me.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Pastor Christy Buckingham was Myuran Sukumaran's spiritual advisor at his execution. Guilty, the film, and is all about the final 72 hours of the Bali Nine's Myuran Sukumaran. It'll screen in each state as part of a national screening event on Wednesday, the 10th of October 2018, World Day Against the Death Penalty. Head to our website for more information. This is RN Drive.